Recording. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the next episode of This Is Life. It is your host, Brandon Harrison, and this is a faith-based encouragement podcast to help you navigate through life, as we are all trying to learn how to navigate through these new normals that we're all learning. And we're in the middle of a series called Black Perspective, where the goal is to help share stories to understand the diversity and the complexity of the Black experience in America. And I have an incredible guest I get to talk to today. Her name is Dr. Diane Forbes Berthoud, and she is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the University of San Diego, University of California, San Diego, UCSD, where her responsibilities include strategic planning, advancing institutional effectiveness, serving as liaison to HR, and leading diversity-focused community engagement. She has over 23 years of experience working in higher education, nonprofit, and government. And I've known her for 5 years. Through Rise San Diego. It's crazy to say 5 years already. And she was my coach and has become a friend and mentor over the last 5 years. I got to be part of the first cohort of Rise San Diego leadership program, and it was a blessing. And it was honestly God that our group came together, and you've just been a blessing to me. I've just got to learn a lot from you, spiritually, professionally, academically, and I'm just excited for people to learn more about you and just for you to share your story. I gave a little quick intro, but how should I call you Dr. Diane, Dr. Ford? I always call you Diane, but I want to make sure
Diane's good. Diane is good. Thank you, Brandon.
Okay. So Diane, what has your journey been like in your career and academics, and how did you get to where you are? That's a big question, but what has your journey been like?
It is a big question. And first, thank you, Brandon, for having me on the podcast. I have been pleased to work with you and your colleagues and friends in the cohort, to work with Rise and all the cohorts since your cohort. And that's, I've often said, working with Rise San Diego and continuing to do so in different ways has been one of the highlights of my life in period, and my time here in California. I've been in California for 10 years. So what has my journey been? I'll speak professionally, but I can't separate the professional from the personal or family, community, or faith. So I'll raise all of those elements in my life. At the moment, I'll start here. I have a senior administrative role at UC San Diego to support the advancement of equity, diversity, and inclusion on campus. And that is working as much as possible to remove the barriers, to advance success for underrepresented minority communities, for communities that are underrepresented in their fields, such as women in STEM, or Blacks, Latinos, Latinx, or Native American student enrollment, for example. We work in conjunction with all of those groups. How did I get here? So many years ago, I think, as I was in high school and also in my family, there was always a lot of interest in my community, in my home, about issues of politics, social justice, advocacy, and community work. My mother was an educator. My father had a business, and they both worked, although we didn't live in those communities. They worked in urban centers, in low-income communities. And they were committed to, one, my father with his business there, and my mom too as an educator teaching in government schools, in a primary school at the third grade level. And I watched them work hard. I heard them talk about politics. I heard them talk about their work. I heard them talk about how a nation, how communities can move forward. And what was consistent in their conversation with me and my sisters was get an education and make sure you get a good one. And particularly having a mom as a teacher, that was not difficult to do, because she herself ensured, with the support of my father, that we would be well educated. And what I mean by that is that we could do the 3 R's, read, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic. But not only that, what was very important in our family was critical thinking and critical speaking and questioning the way things were. And so I grew up with that sense of questioning the way things were and learning how to bring about a change. And I talked about this in a recent feature in the San Diego Women's Magazine, when I was asked about, well, did you always know you wanted to go into education? And the answer is no. I did not always know. At one point, I wanted to be an attorney. I had another stage. I wanted to be a vet. You know, when you're younger, it's like you just kind
Yes.
of go in. And I was not one of those kids. Like at 3, I was like, I want to be a firefighter. Or I want to be a
Right.
congressperson. And then I became that, you know, at 35.
Right. Right.
I wanted to be a vet, as I said. I went back and forth, and I, at one point, did some career tests that said counseling, education, and something else, attorney, because I could, you know, speak fairly well, and I could build a cogent argument. Well, I had a moment where I said to my parents, specifically my mother, I think I want to be a teacher. And she was not happy.
Oh,
wow. She had a look of disappointment. And when I was younger, I did not understand that initial moment. And she was quick to explain, no, I don't want you to be a teacher. And I was like, why? Like, you know, you're a teacher. It's a good profession and all these other things. And she said, because you won't make any money and you won't get the respect that you deserve. And I mean, she told me all these things that were a burden, I know, that were a burden for her that she carried as a teacher, not being well paid, you know, being in an under-resourced school, not getting the resources from the government that we thought were needed, particularly for students in those regions and those areas. And she was concerned that if I did not, quote, marry up or get my own education, that I would be struggling financially. And this was a real concern.
Wow.
And I listened and I thought, well, what am I going to be then? You know, you're a teacher. I thought this was a good thing to do. I'd be helping to build a nation. And she then again quickly followed up and said, oh, no, don't get me wrong. You know, if you want to go into education, that's fine. But I think you would be good in a university setting. She told me this when I was a teenager, in a university setting. And she said, go teach in a university. And she said, not only that, think about running things.
Nice.
So she set me up, and my father was there to support, in my mind as a younger person, to say, education is great, but I don't want you to be at the behest of the government or some system that is going to say you can't earn enough to make a living and you'll have to marry up, which, you know, in her generation, in the 50s and 60s, getting married was not only, oh, I love that person. It was, this is a tool, a strategy towards social and economic mobility. And so there's a way in which she was passing that on, but also saying, and I don't want you to have to depend on a partner to make you.
Yes.
So, and in her short language, study your book. You know, my dad and she would say that often. And so all the lessons you imagine that I'm learning as a younger person, right? Get an education, learn to be independent, of course, contribute to the enterprise of education. But what she was weaving into her narrative was an understanding and a belief that I should also choose leadership.
That's so
because good. Then I could influence what was happening, not only in higher education, but in the nation. And so that initial, no, don't be a teacher, really evolved into, I think you can do not so much better, but I think you have a broader expanse. She saw a talent, my parents saw a talent in me, and a belief in me to bring about change at another level.
Yeah.
And not knowing it, unconsciously or consciously, I followed that path. And I have continued to seek opportunities to bring about justice, to advance priorities and funding and initiatives that would teach, help others learn, that would help me to learn. And so, you know, from that time after high school, I shared that foundation because that's how I got where I am right now. I mean, my own grit and all of that, faith, the work of a great community, but the lessons of my parents. And so from there, I earned a scholarship to undergrad. My parents said, that's the college you're going to, because I got a full scholarship, room, books, and board. And I went to a small liberal arts college in Miami called Barry University. Many international students, mostly students of color, and a number of students from the Caribbean. I was born and raised in Jamaica. And so when I got that funding to come here 30 plus years ago, I took it on my parents' strong advice. And from there, went from one institution to the next, taught for a little time, grades 8 through 10, languages and culture, specifically Spanish structure and grammar. And I taught some cultural studies. And then I wanted to do more and do something different. And that's when the quest for, okay, now you're a young person, you have your first degree, you have some professional experience. What then would you do? And from there, I started looking at programs that would help me advance that mission to improve humanity, bring about equity in places where there was a need. And I became more interested in communication studies, which is what I had done in undergrad.
Okay.
And, studying about cultures is not just habits and practices, but it's about beliefs, who people are, how people learn and bring about change. And so I was looking for programs that incorporated those elements. And I was drawn to programs of communication that studied process and practice, programs about decision making, group process, organizational change, how we converse even, and the dynamics of conflict and resolution and reconciliation and that type of thing. For a time, I thought about seminary and advanced religious studies. And so I applied to a number of institutions, mostly in New York and Washington, D.C., on faith, because I didn't have the full funding.
Right.
And I got into a few universities, including Howard University and some universities in New York. But because of funding, my parents said, well, let's think about where we have family. Again, where the community comes in, because you could live with family and then not worry about extensive costs in graduate housing or something if you don't get funding from the institution. So we would only have to think about tuition.
Right.
And the full backing of my community came in because my father's sister lived in Maryland, and we had relatives who co-signed on things, and my parents sold property and all of that. For me to go to the amazing Howard University in Washington, D.C. HU is the call out that we do, And so we had, as a whole family community, this energy to get me to Washington, D.C. to succeed. And I was there. I was funded for a year, and on faith, my parents were like, look, we don't really have the rest of the tuition, work hard, do what you can. And if you can get funding along the way, that would be amazing. It would take the pressure off of us. And I, had another sister who was in school also, in graduate school. And my parents were saying, do what you can. And I did, was able to earn a fellowship that funded me through the rest of my master's program. And I excelled, did really well. And a professor said, if you want to continue with the graduate program, we encourage you to do that. And I said, I don't have the funding for a doctoral degree. And I didn't know if it would be okay to stay with my aunt. The arrangement was 2 years for a master's program, but to stay longer, a PhD program can take a while, 3 to 5 years, sometimes 7 years for some people, depending on your area of focus and your research and so forth. And in short, it all worked out. My aunt said it was okay to stay. The department said they would fund me all the way through my PhD program. Don't feel rushed.
Goodness.
I was able to teach, earn some money. I met some amazing people, go to conferences. It was an outstanding experience at Howard University in graduate school from 1995 to 2000. And then I continued from one higher ed institution to another higher ed institution, teaching communication. And my last stop before the University of California was Trinity University, a women's college that still has mostly women of color undergrad, and then a co-ed institution in the School of Professional Studies, which is like the business school. They now have a nursing school, I think, or division since I've left. And developed leadership programs there, taught communication, worked in the city, developed community-based projects with students, directed projects at the U.S. Capitol for urban students, and it was quite a pleasure to expose them to the political process, to share the knowledge that I had, and to advance their education and give them opportunities that I had as well. And so that's how I got to the University of California, San Diego, and that's the shorter version. Thank you for asking that.
That's the incredible version. Wow, like I said, I've known you 5 years, and that was so beautiful to hear that journey. We can stop right there. That just inspired me so much just to hear all that. And just the last two questions, wherever you want to take this, but that journey was incredible. What was your highest point in that journey, and what did you learn from that? And what has been your lowest point in that journey? What did you learn from that?
There have been so many. In my mind, I'm still young. I can say I've had a great life. I've had a tremendous set of opportunities, many challenges along the way, many ups and many downs, but hey, that's life.
Yes.
I've crossed many bridges and many rivers. I'm not the only one. And I actually think of, the old hymn, Amazing Grace, through many
Yes.
dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come.
Already. Yeah.
It's grace that has brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. And so even when I think about the highs and the lows, I see lessons. So, a high was earning my doctoral degree. That was major in my path. I am the first. I was the first. I have had relatives since who earned a medical degree.
Okay.
But I earned the first in my family. And it's not so much the order, but it is that it even happened.
Correct.
And all the opportunities that it opened for me there. At Howard University, the practice is, because it's such a large institution and so complex with so many divisions and departments and so on, at the big campus graduation, which is where Oprah has spoken and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and Nelson Mandela, at the big graduation, each school of divinity, school of business, school of architecture, school of social work, each school just stands in mass and sits at the big graduation. They have their individual school of communications and so on, but only the doctoral graduates walk across the stage at the big one. Right.
Wow.
So sometimes you get to shake the hand of the speaker, or you get to pose with whoever it is. And that year, Angela Bassett won an award, a doctoral degree award. And so, smiling, I don't think I shook her hand, but smiling at people like that and waving and being just inches from them, you feel like, oh my God, this is just amazing. But that you're in front of all of your peers who support Black education, historically Black institutions, MSIs, minority serving institutions, and an institution that also serves the global community. Howard has over 100 countries and language represented. I think it's even more now. And to have that, to earn that, to have that moment, to have the full community and the full family and faith community support and back me, so to speak, it was truly an amazing experience, and one that when I look back, I go, I could not have done that without the support of my family, without my parents, without my siblings, without my amazing friends and faith community, without our department that provided that great support, and without our fantastic and talented faculty who brought us to that moment and brought me to that moment. So that was a high. And what I learned from that is, hard work pays off.
Yes.
And persistence pays off. And also that we are people, we're African people. We're also people of the spirit. We don't do what we are doing on our own. Wow. That everything that I've done, and I get emotional about it.
Yeah.
But everything I've done, I have felt the wind, the push of the ancestors, of my family, of God, saying, you got this. Go on ahead. You can take that step. Wow. And when you're in a process like that and you're working and you're doing all these things, sometimes particularly as a person of color, as a woman, as a Black woman, and I was very young earning my degree 20 years ago, sometimes you may feel that, and whoever this is for, I hope it reaches you where you are. You may feel that you cannot do this. And you may feel, and I have felt sometimes, this is not for you. And this is not a path that you should take, or this is not something that you can do. And were it not for the support of great mentors and friends and my family, as I said, and faith community saying, you can do this and we are here for you. And what do you need, Di? Is there something you want? And something that was really important that I will mention, I did have a great community, I still do, and a lot of support from all over the world and everywhere that I've lived. But at the beginning of my doctoral program, my primary mentor and friend passed away suddenly at 45. And that was one of the times I was like, what am I going to do now? So I raised that because when someone has been so instrumental in your development and then they're not there anymore, there's a sense of loss and a sense of lostness. What
Mm-hmm.
do I do now? Who's going to tell me how to do this? It's like being a first generation student, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a program like that, you need an expert. You
Yeah.
need faculty and others to show you the way, because it's not a path you've taken before. But what I've learned is it's both and digging deep inside oneself and remembering stories of faith, remembering stories of resilience or quotes
Yeah.
from people. And it is looking around and reaching out and asking, can you help me with this? Could you review this letter of recommendation? Could you review this grant that
Yeah.
I'm writing for? Can you review this paragraph, or can I talk through this concept with you? I have been able to do that in so many ways. And so, going through Howard and that degree and earning that was one of those beginning moments. I know it's the combination of something, but it was also a beginning moment where I could say, dang, I did that.
Yeah.
Of course, with all that I just mentioned, the wind at my back and the community
Yeah.
and everything else, and the great ones living and departed who cheered me on, and I did that for them and with them in a way. And I could see, okay, well, if that was possible, maybe something else is possible.
Yeah.
And because of what other people did for me, and I hope I have lived up to that faith and I have lived up to that practice, I have tried in my own way, and it's complicated with
Mm-hmm.
my job and work and community work and my family and children and spouse
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. It's been difficult,
Yeah.
but I really do pray that I've been able to, in some small way, with former students or fellow colleagues or trainees or fellows or whoever, that I have in some small way returned that or given to the community or to the world, if you will, even a fraction of what was given to me. To me, that would have, oh my goodness, thank you. That would
You
make
have.
what I've gone through worthwhile, and
Yeah.
that's what I've tried to do. So that's a high. A low, well, I did talk about the low. A low
Yep.
was the death of my beloved mentor, who
Mm-hmm.
helped to walk me through my time at Howard. And that was interrupted abruptly. However, again, the community came right in to support me and many others who needed that upliftment at that time. So that
Yeah.
was a low. I'll just leave that one there.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you had me literally in tears from what you said. That's
Oh,
so
wow.
seriously. That was, like you said, whoever needed that, that was me that needed to hear what you just said. So
I'm glad.
thank you for sharing all that.
Of course.
So powerful. Any last closing encouragement or comments? You already kind of said it in what you were just sharing, but there's so many people I've known you through Rise that have been impacted by you, and you just blessed me profusely, professionally,
I'm
personally,
glad.
spiritually. What is just some last closing comments just to encourage somebody listening to not get to where you're at, but to keep pushing forward, like you said, how to keep pushing forward in their journey and what it takes to have that resilience, that grit. But it was so powerful what you said, just that image of the wind behind your back and ancestors, your family, keep pushing you. And you've been one of those people for me to keep pushing. And because there's been multiple times I'm just like, no, I'm not good as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a pastor, as a son. And you've definitely been one of those people who've been the wind behind my back. So how
Oh
can
my
you,
goodness, thank you.
I'm serious, you really have. And what is just one last little golden nugget for somebody that can keep encouraging them as well?
Well, actually, Brandon, I'd like to speak to two things. I'd
Okay.
like to respond to that, and I feel moved to speak about our current time as well. Right?
Yes,
so I'll speak to that keep pushing forward and how we do that, and I will connect it to our current time. I'll start with the time because I want to end with individual. We're in a time right now where what we're facing is like a triple or quadruple sets of pandemics, if you will, as some scholars have been talking about it, right? There's the public health / medical, and there is the economic, because we are experiencing an economic downturn because of some of what has happened.
Definitely.
And of course, the social and community unrest, right? And dealing with the pangs and the pains and the history and the trauma of slavery and of anti-Black racism that we're facing now.
Wow.
And so it's hard for me to speak to the individual without acknowledging that this has happened,
Yes.
and that we are not just in San Diego or California, but in the world, and in the US specifically, having to face our dark sides and our shadow sides. And I wanted to speak to that because I asked you earlier, well, who's your audience for this podcast, right? And you mentioned some of the community people and 18 to 24-year-olds. And I just wanted to speak and acknowledge the moment that's happening right now, and to, I wouldn't say, just not only challenge us, but encourage us to collectively face the moment, think about how we got here, and also think about what we each and what we collectively, structurally, and institutionally can do to address some of these challenges. Because I can speak to the individual and say, keep going, do this, do that, and give the rah-rah speech. However, we are all embedded in these systems of oppression and systems of challenge from time to time. And the persons who might be listening might do all the individual things so-called right, quote unquote right, but are still faced with what we're facing right now. So this conversation is also about those of us who have the power or different spheres of influence and places that where we can change things. And I'm asking us to step out and be more courageous about using our voice, not just for ourselves, but for others who are not even born yet, those who are coming after us, those who can't, because I know some people are just overwhelmed and stretched and stressed out, and I'm pretty close to that, but I still have some reserve, thankfully. And so I wanted to speak to that moment because this moment is ours.
It is.
Collectively, and this moment is ours to change and to shift. Nobody else is coming up the track or down the track. Right here, this is it. This is it right here. All those who are here from 0 to 100 or 120, whatever the oldest person is, we're here. This earth is ours. This existence is ours. And I'm thinking about how we can, in our own ways, small and large, address racism in a big way, and all the other isms, right? And all the intersectional axes of power and oppression that affect all of us. So I did want to at least, and of course this is involved with the work that I'm doing on campus right now. So it's very close to me day by day, plus my own positionality as a Black woman in this work and in this world. To the individual, and as it relates to professional paths and everything else, there's so many pieces of advice and so many things that I could offer. But what has helped me, and it's not the only thing, but it's just something I'm with now, is to continue to be as humble and as curious as I can be. And sometimes I'm in a room where I'm getting ready to give a talk and somebody does an introduction, and I swear to God, I look over my shoulder like, and seriously, Brendan, I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
That's
Who, me? And it's not because I'm being fake or it's not false modesty, as they say. I honestly look at my life and I go, did I do that? Literally, like Urkel, right?
Yeah.
I went through and I took on many opportunities. I've said yes to a lot of different things. I sometimes have not counted the cost, and sometimes I have not counted or acknowledged the impact. I just keep it moving because there's something else to do. There's someone else to help. There is another foundation to connect with, or another student I can get through to grad school, or someone to help someone get a job or something. I'm not thinking that did that much, and I kept it moving. And I'm glad it's kind of that way because I've been able to not see myself as bigger than I am, but put myself in perspective. That there are people who are doing bigger, better work and more impactful work. And I desire to learn from those people. So the humility is seeing oneself for who we are, for real, and not like, oh, I'm bigger than I am, or I'm smaller than I am, but really, this is who we are. Human beings seeking to learn, as how I see myself, a person who seeks to learn, someone of faith who seeks to learn from God, the community around nature, all of that, for my children, for my spouse, and so forth. And then curiosity. I've been thinking about that for the last few months. I wonder, the statement that starts, I wonder what or I wonder why, or what is it that drives that behavior, or what mechanisms, or what strategies I'm often wanting to know.
Yeah.
And when I stop wanting to know, I'm dead. And when I stop
Right.
wanting to learn, or when I stop asking, I'm dead. And if I
Right.
think I have the answer to everything that's going on now with these racist challenges and our presidency and the election, if I think I know everything, then why am I here?
Mm.
So the curiosity and the humility, I think, go a long way. Asking the critical questions,
Yeah.
not coming to every conversation with the familiar tropes and the familiar narratives, but coming to the conversation with a, literally tilting your head and saying, figuratively or symbolically,
Uh-huh.
I wonder what that's about. Or if I don't know, or if I didn't have that experience, okay, you've lived in, let's say, south side of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I listen more and I say, oh, that sounds similar to something in DC, but I'm not going to say it's just like DC. I'm going to say, could you tell me more about that? Or what did you
Wow.
learn while you were growing up there?
That's good.
Or what did your parents talk about when it came to Juneteenth?
Mm-hmm.
Or name an event, name a thing. I'm often striving to remain open to learning and open to understanding. It's imperfect. I'm imperfect. But I do think the curiosity and the humility are really important. And then for me, for sure, continuing to grow and build in faith
Yeah.
as much as possible. I've seen my own limitations physically, psychologically, professionally, medically, and in so many other
Mm.
ways. And those instances, as well as the calling of family members sharing with me things of faith and things of God, have drawn me closer to learn more about God and how to walk in faith. Again, imperfect, again, without, highfalutin stuff. It's day by day seeking and learning, use really that humility and curiosity again in faith
Yeah.
that has really led me to where I am. And many of the things I've done and many of the things I have achieved and have been able to accomplish have really been because of, I think, God showing me
Yeah.
how to live and what choices to make, what groups and organizations with which to affiliate,
Mm-hmm.
where to give money, who to teach, who to learn from, who to be in relationship with. All of those kinds of things are guided by a spiritual compass for me. So I will close with that. As I say, keep on keeping on,
Yeah.
fight the good fight. We are not alone. And if people feel alone out there, and I know this is a tough time, reach out somehow, some way. Phone
That's good.
call, text,
Yep.
social media, holla, just a
Yeah.
word, help.
Yes.
And I hope each person listening has at least one person where they can holla and say
Mm-hmm.
help or hi or something. And I hope that as the community is on the other end and they hear that, they can say, I'm here. I'm here.
Well, Diane, there's so much more to say, but all I can say is thank you. This
Thank you.
conversation has been incredible. It's been powerful. And I know just listening to myself, whoever listens is going to be empowered, inspired, and encouraged. So thank you so much for your time. And all the insight that you shared is really impactful. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. My pleasure. Thank you so much.